We're going to start in Genesis 29. We'll read the chapter beginning in verse 1. So Genesis 29:1. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the sons of the east. And he looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it. For from the well they watered the flocks. Now the stone on the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, they would then roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the mouth of the well. And Jacob said to them, My brother, where are you from? And they said, We are from Haran. And he said to them, Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. And he said to them, Is it well with him? And they said, It is well. And behold, Rachel his daughter is coming with the sheep. And he said, Behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered. Water the sheep and go, pasture them. But they said, We cannot until all the flocks are gathered. And they rolled the stone from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came about when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went up, rolled the stone from the mouth of the well, and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of her father, and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. So it came about when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. Then he related to Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, Surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful of form and face. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. And Laban said, It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, Give me my wife, for my time is completed, that I may go into her. And Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. Now it came about in the evening, when he took his daughter Leah and brought him to her, and Jacob went in to her. Laban also gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me? And Laban said, It is not the practice of our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also for the service which you shall serve with me for another 7 years. And Jacob did so, and completed her week, and gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. Laban also gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maid. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served with Laban another 7 years. Now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and named him Reuben, for she said, Because the Lord has seen my affliction, surely now my husband will love me. Then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. So she named him Simeon. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, Now this time my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore he was named Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son. This time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she named him Judah. Then she stopped bearing. Kind of heartbreaking at the end there. Okay, let's go back to Genesis 29:1. So it's always so intriguing to me how some things we get such detail, and then other stories are just so, like we're going to cover 20 years. I mean, no, actually 14 in this chapter, but that is just, everything is by design. It's just a reminder if God's written. It's so strategic what He includes and what He doesn't. Okay, let's go back. Genesis 29:1. Says, Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the sons of the east. If you'll remember last week, he left Beersheba and went to Bethel, which was probably about 50 miles. And then now from Bethel, he finishes his journey. It was 50 miles, so didn't we say about 2 days? 25 miles a day, about? And so I think from this point, he has about 400 more miles to go. And so he completes 400 miles in this verse. And he ends up in the land of the sons of the east. And we talked about that. I always just mentally think, the further east you go, the further, I don't know if it applies here, but I always think about that. Okay, so there we have it. So he ends up in this land in verse 2. And he looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it. For from that well they watered the flocks. Now the stone on the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, they would then roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the mouth of the well. Just a couple of side notes. If you'll remember when Jacob is taking this journey, he's about 77 at this point. So he's walked. Who is Jacob?
Is 77 in his age?
He's 77.
Wow.
That's what they think.
It's hard to even see that as romantic, isn't it?
I mean,
I'm trying to think of it as, if it's
It's not that romance can happen when you're older, but you just vision.
But just think, okay, so he's going to live to be 147. So he's about midlife. So, mid-40s. Does that help?
and you know what? They may have looked a lot better back then
It's a
because
visual.
they lived so long.
Yeah.
I don't think they considered much what people look like.
Mm-mm.
That's
No.
true.
It was more
This
to say
was
dad
desert,
is
and everybody's skin was weathered. So.
How many sheep
But
are
Rachel was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different world.
And 14, probably.
I know, she would have been
They
very...
might not have been so bad.
So this was just interesting, this little side note. The flocks were gathered, and the well having a stone over it. One, this stone would have been very large, so one person really wouldn't have moved it by themselves. Usually it would have been a couple of the shepherds, 2 or 3 of the shepherds would move the stone. And it also would have been that, like, this was a shared well. So all of the sheep would have been watered there, but it was a shared well. So not just Jacob's or Laban's, but it would have been a shared well. And what they would do is they would wait until all the flocks got there, and then at the same time, they would 2 or 3 of them would go remove the stone, and then they would all water their sheep and then cover it back. One, it kept the water supply clean, and then the other thing, it kept it evenly
Distributed.
Yes, so that one, they weren't taking more than their share, and they did it all together at the same time, so you could see, and no one was dishonest about it. I guess. So anyway,
Didn't they have to draw the water out? I mean, the animals didn't drink directly out of the well because the people drank out of the well too. So,
Yes, they would use their pitchers and
and their
Their
buckets that they
Probably
drew
had
out of
buckets
the
and troughs.
yes,
But the rock was to cover it up and keep it clean.
Exactly.
it kept it clean, and it kept them from coming and
Because the sand blew and it would have filled it up with sand. If
Yes.
it was covered.
But this is the only, I mean, we've read about other wells, and this is the only one I've found that had that stone, and I thought that was so interesting. But it was to protect it, obviously, but also because it was such a large stone, no one was meant to move it alone. So it just kept you from sneaking in, getting your water, you know.
Does that kind of just
Some
go
kind of
along? Is the reason why the boulders mentioned with this well because it kind of goes along with all the scheming people with this story?
That's a very good point.
Maybe they didn't want anybody else to know it was a well.
Maybe. I don't know. But I did
Part
think
of
that
that
was
character.
interesting because that is that's good. Phil.
That's interesting.
And don't worry about the flocks getting mixed up together. You'd think all of these
Right.
different flocks of sheep coming in, they'd get all,
I know they all look alike.
but they know their master.
Yeah, they know their master's
They
voice.
know their
And
master's
they will
voice.
go, they are family, so they go with who they know.
Isn't it
Even if they get
interesting?
all mixed up in there. And if you want to change one from one flock to another, you better take them a long ways from home.
Really?
Because they will want to
They'll
be
stay
better.
with their voice. Okay, that is very good.
So the sheep know their family. That's what I feel.
They know
their
the
master.
voice of their master, and they follow his voice. And they do not follow the voice of a stranger. Okay. So then verse 4. And Jacob said to them, My brother, where are you from? And they said, We are from Haran. And he said to them, Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. And he said to him, Is it well with him? And they said, It is well. And behold, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. Okay, if you'll just, this was before this doesn't seem that fascinating to us. This is prior to GPS. I mean, I can't help when I read this think about what we read in chapter 24 when Abraham's servant made this exact same journey. So when the servant made the journey, he wasn't alone. He had people with him. He had lots of gifts with him, And then this time, Jacob's making this trip alone. And in one of the coming up chapters, he even makes mention it was just he and his staff, meaning his walking stick staff, and making this journey together. I mean, just he alone. So the servant had a crew, he's alone. And then he just happens on a well, happens that it's the time of the feeding. And then he asks, what did he say? How did he say it? Where are you from? And they said, Haran. I mean, that's exactly what he was looking for. And the other thing that I thought was fascinating to think about in comparison and contrast is when the servant made the trip, I don't know if you remember how much he prayed. I mean, he prayed over every aspect of his trip. I mean, recorded prayers, give us success on this trip, for my servant Abraham. He just prayed continually. And we're just not going to see any recorded prayers here. So God still obviously directed him to the exact spot where he needed to be at the exact time he needed to be. But I just thought it was fascinating to think about this, that when the servant made this trip and he prayed so much, then when he found the right place, I mean, he's on his knees in a very public place praising God. And so I just think when we're praying for something and we recognize the answer and it just leads to this pure worship because you're so grateful because you've asked, and we're just not going to see that same kind of gratitude. We're not going to see the same prayers in this. I don't know what it means. It's just an FYI, just an observation in comparing the two trips. So, and this probably is not the same well. I don't know how you know, but one of the commentaries said it's probably not because it was a shared, and I don't know. So anyway,
Was it safe to travel alone?
well, last week, God promised him, I will not leave you until I've done everything I promised. And part of that promise was to bring him right back to that same spot. So,
I mean, during those times.
I don't know. But I know if the Lord has promised to
Oh,
bring you
yeah.
back, you're going to be safe. And so he had that comfort, that confidence that God was going to bring him back.
Do you think part of the difference in the servant and the prayers, and Jacob and the recorded prayers, is the fact that the servant was not in direct contact with the Lord as Jacob would have been?
Part of the covenant.
Exactly.
Yes, that's a good point. That's very good. Yeah. And
Because Jacob was family,
yes.
where the servant was the outsider.
Yes. That is good. And he's just, he is part of the covenant. And it will be, yeah. That's good. Okay. Okay, so he finds, do you know Laban? And then notice he says in verse 5, he says the son of Nahor. Laban was actually the son of Bethuel, who was the son of Nahor. But I guess they do not have a word for grandparent or grandson. And so it was all, you'll see the son of David, and it could be generations down. So don't let that confuse you when you're studying scripture. Because
So
sometimes it
he's
could
the
be.
son of Nahor is his grandfather?
Nahor is actually his grandfather. It's Nahor, Bethuel, and then Laban. Okay, so he's there, and it says, behold, in verse 6, behold, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. And like Natalie said, she was probably very young, 12 to 14. Very young.
So now we can kind of understand why he probably said 7 years.
Yeah, oh, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that, Kim. That's a very good point.
You want her to.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, didn't they marry that young?
I don't know.
Yes, they did. Mm-hmm.
12, 13?
Makes
Yes.
you wonder how old were the girls because
Unless you were a man, because
You know,
it's
if the older one was, if Rebecca was
I don't know if
14
she
at the
could
first
drink yet.
time, then she wasn't married until she was 21.
Yes.
But then he's in his 80s.
84. 84 to be exact. Yeah. I know.
Well, but that was common that they married their daughters to older men because they were more established and more.
Yes.
to take care of it better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the average age of the covered wagon bride was 14.
Uh-huh.
Really? Yeah.
What about
Can
the
you imagine
groom?
having to go through childbirth?
The average age of the
Well, I'm just
groom.
thinking, like, if she wanted to marry Rachel
Oh.
first, and she was really 14 when they got married, then she was like, she had to have been younger than that, 'cause she would have been.
She was 14 when she got
Well,
married? you're
right-
saying?
Rachel's the younger of the two, so Leah would have been, as close as a year or two older. And so she was 14, then he worked, so she would have been 21 when they actually,
Well, it's kind of
Rachel
old.
would have been 20.
I mean,
yeah, 21, and it's your 23.
well, she knew he loved her, though.
But you also have to remember that Laban is sort of conniving.
Yes.
And so it's like, well, I don't want to lose my free labor.
No.
So, you can wait a little while and prove your love and that you're consistent. All in the name of, I'm going to take care of my daughter.
And it was tradition. Don't forget tradition.
was.
They're very traditional people.
So this
Yes.
A lot of
was
families
the
today are.
Yes, very much. So. Well, and we'll talk about the tradition of their wedding. Okay, so then verse 7. So this is I don't know who's speaking. Let's see. Jacob asked, "Do you know Laban?" And then he asked, "Is it well with him?" And they said, "It is well. And behold, Rachel is coming." And he said, I guess this is Jacob, "Behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered. Water the sheep and go pasture them." But they said, "We cannot until the flocks are gathered." And they rolled the stone from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And so it wasn't time to water. I guess they were still waiting on more flocks. Obviously, Rachel's is one of them. She's a shepherdess. And I guess that was not unusual, but it was usually the youngest. Was usually the shepherd.
Really? Well, if Leah's eyes weren't good too.
I know, there you go. That's a good point.
Well, King David, though, he was the shepherd too, and he was the youngest.
Yeah. Okay, and then verse 10, and it came about when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went up and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well, watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. So this would have been unique. It wasn't time yet. They said they wait for all the sheep. Well, when he sees her, he goes and unrolls it by himself. 77-year-old man goes and removes the stone by himself and then waters her sheep. And again, I kept thinking about 24, where Rebecca came and watered the servants' camels and gave him water. And then this one, Jacob, is watering her flock.
Her personal flock.
Right?
Well, her
So
dad's.
this is a very strange way of flirting.
Like I've got muscles. I'm 77
Maybe
years old. I
77,
still
but-
got it. He's 77 years old.
But that was all in God's design.
Yes, it was. Yes.
You know, God gives strength when strength is needed.
Yes.
He probably
Would-
is in pain
Would
afterwards.
Haran have been part of the original lands that God gave? I mean, that's not Canaan.
No, where Haran is,
It's way up high.
he would have walked all the way across Israel and then all the way across Syria and just inside Turkey's border.
Okay,
so
so-
today it would be just inside Turkey.
Okay, but it's not
It's
part,
part
of
of
what
the
God.
promised
Because I thought, well, if
land.
that's part of what God gave him, it's like, well, it's mine anyway.
No, it's not. It was
Okay.
not part of that.
So he walked from, can you say that again? He walked.
He walked all the way across Israel and all the way across what today we call Syria
and then
into
today Syria.
right, and just inside the border between Turkey and Syria, just inside Turkey's border.
That is interesting.
That's a yeah.
Have y'all ever thought, like how our soldiers are going over to Iraq, like the pictures that they're taking? Like my husband took his pictures, and it's just amazing what they see, and it's destroyed. I mean, a lot of it's destroyed, but some of the stuff they do get to see.
Yeah. Okay, so he removes the stone. He waters the flock. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and this would have been their customary greeting kiss. He kissed Rachel and lifted his voice and wept. So I'm sure I don't know why, just overwhelmed. I don't know. I'm not sure why he would have.
She was beautiful.
It says he is weeping for joy because he finally found his relatives. That's kind of what my
Yeah.
context. Does not paint a very attractive picture to me.
But he was excited to find his mother's relatives.
Yes. Well,
Jacob was very close to his mother, and he was excited to find his mother's relatives, and she was a beautiful girl, and he was a little overwhelmed by it.
well, and just the significance of how far he's traveled. They don't have GPS. He finds himself at the very well where Rachel is watering the flocks. I mean, it's just, that would be just overwhelming to think. I mean, he doesn't voice a praise here like the servant did, where he just prostrated himself right there and worshipped. He doesn't do that, but he does have the weeping. I'm sure just.
Sometimes that's all you can do. You
I
can't
know,
voice
there's
it
no
sometimes,
words,
you know.
there's just you just weep. And so,
And I
yeah,
think weeping was maybe was common emotion then. It's only had
it still is. They're
established
very,
a module
like,
thing over there.
yeah.
Well, he's probably also a lot more social because he didn't go out and hunt. He didn't do stuff. He was more in camp type person. So he's used to being around lots of people. Well, and he just took a 400 plus journey with nobody
Alone.
alone, and that would
Being
take a
alone.
long time.
I would weep too.
You see somebody on them.
And he lifted up his voice. I know, and then, I mean, a female single. What I mean, it just I don't know. Would have probably been overwhelming.
I'm sure he had everything worked out, didn't he?
Yes, he does. He does that. And then verse 12, and Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of her father, and he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. So it came about when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him. Of course, if you'll remember, Laban was the one there. And when he saw the gifts that the servant brought, that's when he was impressed, when he saw the gifts. And so I'm sure he remembers that. But here's Jacob. He's coming with nothing. So anyway, Laban runs out to meet him. He says, and then he related to Laban. Wait, let me just read 13 again. So it came about when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Then he related to Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month. And that today we say flesh and blood, but this "you are my bone and flesh," it's directly related to Genesis chapter 2 when he said, "You're bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." It's directly related to the creation, and that's how they refer to relatives. Like we say flesh and blood, but they would say flesh and bone. FYI. And then Jacob stays a month, and it looks like he was evidently helping out. And then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And that's going to be important. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful of form and face. I don't know what it means that Leah had weak eyes. I find it interesting that it's contrasted with Rachel's beauty. Right.
I think she wasn't as pretty.
Yeah.
Because mine says delicate and tender, and when I think of those words, I think beauty. I don't. You know, when you call somebody delicate and tender.
I know, that's a compliment.
But I agree with you. They contrast it with Rachel's. That makes it seem like it is a bad thing.
Yes, and
Yeah, tender.
I know. I just the contrast was
You know, her
interesting.
eyes could have been set very close together, which made her appear cross-eyed or something of that ilk, which would have given her a different look entirely.
And they said that those people admired sparkly knives.
Yes.
That was a feature they found attractive.
Maybe she had allergies and she'd been out there. And they were like mine, always red.
Exactly. Yes.
We can relate to that.
So, and then we see Rachel was beautiful of form and face.
Which means she was shapely.
Yes. Yes. Now Jacob loved Rachel. So he said, she's the first one he met, plus he's been there a month. And Jacob
something about
loved
her.
Rachel. So he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. And notice he's the one that set the timeline. Jacob himself said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. And again, when the servant came, he had all these gifts to give and took her immediately. Jacob's coming with nothing except his ability to work.
That's what I was wondering, is that, normally when you go, didn't that time period when they would marry somebody, they would give something.
From what I read, the dowry thing or the bride price had not really started yet.
Oh,
Like it wasn't really part of but
It
it's
probably started the trend.
there you go. There you go.
Wow.
Yeah, it's probably
Yeah.
yeah.
Isn't 7 supposed to be a perfect number?
What's what I was
Complete.
Complete.
Complete, full. And so he offered to work 7 years for Rachel. And then Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man, so stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. I know, that's like one of the sweetest
That's really
verses.
romantic.
It is. It's one of the sweetest verses. They seemed but a few days. And I just love how it's recorded. I love how it is recorded. So, it's just sweet. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is completed that I may go into her. So the 7 years just flew right by, and here we have it. It's time. Jacob has to do the initiating. He was counting the days. So the time has come. And then Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. Now it came about in the evening that he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him, and Jacob went into her. Laban also gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me? So what we
find out till morning.
That's what I was
I'm
thinking.
thinking that's what
Is she wearing something covering her, or is he drunk?
Struck from the feast.
I do too.
But how would you not know that
and
that's
they
different?
did wear thick veils.
Did she have stayed out like that? Maybe she stayed like that. the
And
whole
it
time.
sounds like they gathered the men for the feast. It doesn't only sound like the women were there. So he had feasted with her yet. It's very dark. I mean, if you've ever been out, like they didn't have street lights.
So once
and-
they do the ceremony, he's actually married
Okay,
her?
yes, and we're going to talk about that, that aspect in a minute. But I just can't get over the irony where Jacob pretended to be Esau. Jacob and his mom.
Oh, ooh, that's good.
Full circle with it. Yeah, I must say full circle. Because Jacob and his mom schemed, and he pretended to be Esau, got the blessing, and now we have Leah pretending to be Rachel.
So is that why he didn't throw the big fit and he worked 7 more years for Rachel?
I
Because
don't
he had
know.
schemed with his mom.
I mean, I don't know why the scripture doesn't address it, but that would certainly be.
Well, I mean,
A
everybody reaps what
possibility.
they sow.
Well,
Even if they're in God's favor, they'll reap what they sow.
so the evening he took his daughter for Leah and brought her to him.
Right, Laban.
So he
Laban
already-
switches him, which is the same thing that his sister Rebecca had done. Puts one in place of the other. And so, yeah. I mean, that's all I could say was full circle.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Well, I always think he's got to have been so drunk that he
Yes.
couldn't tell because they obviously looked very different. Rachel
Yes.
was very shapely. Well, if
Yes.
you're not very shapely, you just don't have that.
Right. I mean, I'm thinking there must have been some thick veils and some dark rooms. But I want to talk about the tradition of the wedding, too.
I'm so excited.
I mean, exactly. Little.
I
Um,
mean, come on, after 84 years.
that is true. That is true.
I mean, the first thing he says is, can I sleep with her now? I mean,
Got what he deserved.
7 years.
Yes. I mean, and just when he comes out, what is this you have done to me? That had to, been exactly what he saw. What have you done to me? So, yes. And he says, why then have you deceived me? Well, this is just a family tradition.
Oh, I forgot to mention.
Yeah. So then Laban said, it is not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Okay. We just had this whole just flashback last chapter or 2 chapters ago. The older was supposed to receive the blessing. The younger took the blessing. He's saying, not in this culture. The older marries first, and then the younger. The firstborn had to marry first. And so it just seems like such irony.
Then why didn't the
False-
father marry Leah off to someone else?
Well,
Nobody wanted one.
exactly. It had been 7 years. No suitors had come her way.
Maybe he wanted to put it in the family too, and there not been any adequate family members to take it.
Then I thought it was
a
funny.
dowry involved in those weddings too, and somebody had to pay always. And that had to do with how these families interacted with others, with the money that changed hands.
He didn't think he'd be able to get her married off, so he
Yeah, panic mode, and she's. Oh.
And
But-
because
but
she
they-
was considered damaged goods because her eyes were bad. So the chances of marrying her off were very slim, and Laban knew from the time she was a child she was going to be hard to marry off. So he was a schemer.
Oh, yes, he
And
was.
he learned that from his father.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
his father was a schemer.
His
I thought it was
sister's
funny,
a
though.
schemer.
that Laban didn't say, "Oh, well, since we had this misunderstanding, I'll go ahead and give you
Yeah.
Rachel." It was like, no, 7 more years later.
Uh-huh. Yeah. But I mean,
Because he's a good worker, obviously.
I mean, I
And
know.
he loves Rachel.
Yeah.
Yes, he loves Rachel. Yeah, and he would have done anything. But I know from Scripture, from our study in Genesis, God intended one man and one woman for life. Yeah, always. And, and I was thinking back to the well thing where the servant, I mean, when he saw Rebecca, he thought she was the one, but he never acted. He prayed. He asked for sign, confirmation. I need to know that she's the one you had set apart. There's just no praying here. There's no confirmation here. It's just, she's pretty and I want her. And so I don't know. I don't know if it was intended to go differently and just, I don't know.
But I
Choices
repeat,
factor.
that was the servant with Rebecca. This is direct communication with God.
But God never changed his mind on 2 wives. It was long.
But he always was teaching lessons.
Yes. Always.
Always teaching lessons, and we always pay for sin.
Yes.
We always pay for sin.
Choices
And
have
we paid for sin in
consequences.
the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. And even though Christ died on the cross for our sins, we still, as Christians, when we sin, there's still regeneration to be paid. Yes.
The consequences, choices have consequences. And we really saw that with King David, too. I mean, his family was in turmoil till the day he died, and then some, to this day, I guess. But in such turmoil over the choice he made. And so I think you're right, and I think that is confirmation that we are his, that he just continues to chisel away and not let us get away with it, but continues to chisel away. Yeah, that's such a good point. And choices have consequences. If you could just teach your kids, choices have consequences. And they always are much further reaching than you ever intended.
May not happen today,
Right.
but it will get there.
Well, I mean, it took Jacob a long time to get to this point, and
Question.
yes.
Okay, because we're going with customs here that the oldest has to marry first and all that stuff. Okay, have they already arrived at the custom of when you become betrothed that person is your wife, that you would have to have a divorce? Who knows?
I just have no idea.
Because I know he asked for his wife.
Yes.
It's like, okay, so is that already kicked in where we're betrothed, so therefore we're married even though we haven't consummated this?
I think that probably happened early on.
Yeah, I think what's new and modern is the not being committed.
Right.
I mean, so, I think.
Okay, because I thought,
think
well,
that
that's, if they're already, would have to already have a divorce because they've already pronounced their betrothal,
Uh-huh.
then it wasn't, because my commentary says, well, he asked for his wife, not Rachel, so Laban
Right.
could switch that. It's like,
Uh-huh.
well, if that custom was already in place, though,
That would have been,
that
yeah.
would have been, you know who I mean.
Yes. Yeah.
She is technically my wife.
I promise you, Laban.
Well, yeah, I knew.
Yes, yes. Okay, that is such a good point. Yeah.
Jewish.
That's
Well, and at this point, you know, he probably cares for Leah. He probably would have not. I mean, he couldn't have just left her, y'all. I mean, after finding out that it was
I
her.
can't think.
What could he have done?
New Testament times.
I mean, what could Jacob have done at that point, realizing that that's his wife in the morning?
But see, you still
Till
Rachel's
death
so
do you
innocent.
part.
Yeah.
You're married till death do you part, and that's that.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm sure
She
he
was
probably
pretty.
carefully, because obviously he's being intimate with her.
That's what I was
I
thinking
know.
too.
I mean, there's got to be something, or maybe when Rachel's not available, he's with her. I don't know.
But it's still not God's plan. That was never God's
I think he
idea.
was just a good man, and it's like, yeah,
I don't know. Okay. So, okay, then read verse 26.
But this was not God's plan. That's a good point.
Okay, no, two wives were never part of God's plan. Ever. Adam and Eve. That's his plan.
But it was allowed.
Well, not by
Evident.
God.
I know.
It was accepted by people.
Accepted by the society.
Acceptable
Yes.
tradition.
We were just talking though, I can't think of anybody in the New Testament, any Jewish person that had more than one wife.
That's what I was just thinking. I wonder when this
No.
this
Yeah, when did this stop?
tradition
Tradition
started.
evolve into one.
Well, it was
All
a
the
very,
trouble they got
it
into.
was a very common practice,
Mhm.
just because the childbearing was
Right.
so important. I mean, it was a common practice just for the practical purpose of childbearing, so it became acceptable. But it was not. Go back to Genesis. That was not God's plan.
Yeah, but think about like the kings and queens we learn about in
I
history
know.
class. I mean, they would go and kill off their wives though because they knew it was not appropriate.
But
I
Abraham.
mean, obviously killing your wife isn't appropriate either, but they knew not to be married.
It's like, how can we get around this? I mean, how can we get around this?
Well,
How can we
that's
get around
like-
the dilemmas? So let me kill my wife.
That's
So-
like Sarah. She couldn't have two husbands. She'd have to kill Abraham, her husband. But the men could have more. I don't know.
But when
And then it was okay to
stopped?
have a maid, or was it okay? Was it okay to sleep? Is he sleeping with these maids too?
Not yet. Well, but
But
not
it's
yet.
acceptable.
It was
Okay.
acceptable, but by society.
By society.
Right. The culture had accepted that.
I know, because there's so much information and deep information that you must.
I know, and I'm so inadequate on that. So if you have good commentaries
I'll
that.
pester my husband, but yeah,
Yes.
I think he does have some good commentaries.
Okay, verse 26. But Laban said, "It is not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn." So it was acceptable to have more than one wife, but it was not acceptable for the younger.
Well, why didn't he address this 7 years ago?
Well, see, there was still hope that Leah could find a suitor.
Okay. Well, why didn't he
It
address
wasn't
this?
until-
Why didn't he say, "Oh, by the way"?
Because he's Laban and he's a schemer, and he was
But you know what? You know what's so sad
he
about
had
this?
this plan. That's probably why he
The men
ordered
are
the
not-
feast.
The men are not thinking about Leah's heart.
No,
here.
they could no.
Now,
Okay,
the
let me-
Father's not
the
thinking.
equation.
That's true. Maybe it isn't about the heart.
Laban didn't care about her.
Love was never.
Laban cared about Laban.
Women are like property.
Right.
There's just so many cattle.
Just
we gotta get rid of.
childbearing. Yeah.
Well, you know what's funny is down here about her name.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead, say it.
oh, may I?
Yes, absolutely.
It says down here, 29:16 down here at the bottom. It says Leah. The name means cow,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
Rachel is it ewe?
It's ewe lamb.
Respectively appropriate in herdsman's family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cow and ewe lamb.
Well, you know, it's
So was she
interesting
born
that
with a lazy eye, so they named her Cow?
Cows don't have lazy eyes.
I know, but
They have beautiful eyes.
I thought they liked cows.
They do. I don't
Cows
think
Pigs
so.
are the prettiest ones.
Really?
I think so. Eyelashes.
Oh, really?
Cows
Okay.
are a little
Closer
more
than
valuable.
they moved me.
Cows are.
More valuable.
A lot more valuable than
I
a
read
sheep.
the description, Caroline.
Yeah.
Okay, verse 28. And Jacob did, 27. Complete the week for this one, and we will give you the other also for the service which you shall serve with me for another 7 years. So, we've talked about this with the Jewish wedding, that they would have which I think was what you were asking. They'd have a ceremony, and then you would go to your bridal chamber for 7 days, 1 week, 7 days, and then you would emerge and have the big banquet. So it looks like this is kind of the beginnings of that. We'll see it develop further in the scriptures.
But everybody had to know that he was working for Rachel.
Everybody knew.
So the ceremony is at night, and
The
then
ceremony,
When
and
you
then
come
you
out,
go
it's
to
like-
your bridal
But it's like
chamber.
when they come out and they find out what Laban did, it's kind of like you would think you wouldn't want your name tarnished like that about the trickery.
I think that was
how many days was the
I think
honeymoon?
that was
5
the source
days,
of
you
his
said?
pride.
7.
Seven.
It's
At that
7
point,
days
I
on the
thought
month.
there was so much wine flowing, nobody
Yes.
cared.
Yes.
And then there's a celebration.
I just-
What did you say?
I just think that was so part of that culture.
Maybe.
Just they're what would be a good word?
Conniving.
Yes. I mean, it's just part of that cult, which is probably why they had the big stone on the well. And, yeah,
So they had a reception after the honeymoon.
right, and it would last 7. And
The reception
by the time
would
we
last
get
7.
to the later in the Jewish history, they would have had. It will be at the groom's home. His father will host it, and then you entertain the guests all week, and then the bride and groom emerge at the end of the week, and you have your big wedding banquet.
Mm-hmm.
So they have the feast, they have the ceremony, and then they have the week in there.
And then they have like a little reception at the end.
I don't know what they did here.
Okay.
At the end of this one, they had another wedding. So he marries Leah, and then a week later, he marries Rachel. So, verse 28, and Jacob did so and completed her week. Then he gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife.
I think he had to at that point. I bet he gave her to him pretty quick.
So he worked, and then he earned he earned Leah, and then he was given Rachel, and now he owes.
But
7
you
years.
didn't have to wait another 7 years.
I
Yeah.
know. Oh. So, and each of the daughters are given a maidservant, and they're going to also come into play. So Rachel has Bilhah, and Leah has Zilpah. Okay, verse 30. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban another 7 years.
He's got to be annoyed by that.
Well, it's just heartbreaking. But starting in verse 31, now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So again, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all 3 of their wives were barren. I just find that so fascinating. Because the promise is that their offspring will be as numerous as the sand of the sea, or sand and dust of the earth and stars in the sky, and yet they're all 3 barren. I just find it so fascinating. So, let there be no mistake, God divinely intervened. But here, I just love how, God's kindness. Like, he sees Leah, he knows, and so, just he always has compassion on the brokenhearted. Oh, he's so kind. And so, he saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb. And Leah conceived and bore a son and named him Reuben. For she said, because the Lord has seen my affliction, surely now my husband will love me. And Reuben means like behold a son, or I see it. Ben always is son. When you have Benjamin, it's a son. then always means son. So here you have behold a son or look a son. See, I have a son. And she says it because the Lord has seen my affliction. Surely now my husband will love me.
Oh, it's so sad.
I know, because that was such a big. That's why you married, is to have a family and have children.
And boy children
Boy,
were always
that was the
Prized.
yes.
And it doesn't even sound like he respected her at all.
Then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. So she named him Simeon. And Simeon comes from the root word shema, to hear. So God's heard, and so he was the son, so she names him to hear. And even Simeon means to hear, but in the sense of obedience, like heard and heeded. And so anyway, Simeon. And then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore she named him Levi, which means to join together, to attach, to twine together, Levi. And so she was hoping with the 3rd son. And I mean, if you've never... I was even thinking about this, like with us, that desperation to make someone love you, to earn, and just the frustration and emptiness of trying to earn love or earn something. I just thinking about that. And then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she named him Judah. Then she stopped bearing, but we'll see, just for a season, because she ends up having 6 of the 12 sons. But Judah means praise, but it's interesting because it's yada, and yad means hand. So it's like a celebration using your hands. So you can just, I don't know, it's clapping or raising your hands, but anyway, it's a great celebration involving hands, yada. And so that's what she named him. And the other thing is just God's amazing kindness and just his kindness and compassion on her through her offspring. I mean, Judah is the lineage of Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, she is in the lineage of Christ. And there is no greater blessing. She got to be in that. And so she was blessed to be in that. And then also Levi, she had Levi. He became the priesthood.
That's what I
So
thought.
the caretakers of the worship, and so she has that.
But I think it's interesting to note that it took her that long to recognize praise for the Lord.
Yes, that is such a good point.
That's a good
Yes,
point.
Up to that time, it was all about her
yes, and earning love, getting love.
trying to get him to love her. But at that point, she praised the Lord.
Yes,
Don't you think that may have come from her father? I mean, look at her father. I mean, she has to know the trick that he pulled.
Well, of course she knew.
And just being raised by that, and just maybe all along, knowing Rachel was the pretty one. Rachel. That's what I think about. Yeah.
I think so too. It could have been the age too, because when you're a teenager, you're always kind of seeking the boy, and then when you're a little older, you realize.
well, of course, she'd have been in her 20s. She would have been her, but yet it's the same exact idea. Yet she was trying so hard to earn the love of her husband, and then realizing, no, she has the favor of God.
That's great that Judah means praise.
The praise, yada. And it's a celebratory.
She had grown, like you said. She'd become.
Yeah, it finally was about God and not.
She finally recognized it was time to praise the Lord.
So yeah, that's really, really good. So she became the mother of the priesthood, and then also the mother of the Messiah.
But she may have been
And
a
all the
wonderful woman.
kings
She
came
didn't-
from Judah. All the kings. So
She may have been an amazing woman, though, to her children. I mean,
From the tribe of Levi,
yeah.
she probably instilled some good things in those boys.
Yeah. Because she was probably very gracious, because That's what she had in her heart. She didn't, you know, it wasn't anything out here. It was all inside.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions on this chapter?
Can hardly wait for the next one.
I know,
I know,
it's
this is
so
so
good.
good. I was like jumping. I was like so excited to get here this morning.